righty, hello everyone. Let me just make sure, can I get a thumbs up in the chat? Can you hear me? Maybe, yes. Awesome. Welcome everyone. You are here for the Negative Space panel, Editors Unite. Yeah, we're so excited for this one. As you saw, we have some awesome guests today. My name is Noel. I'm a co-founder here at Negative Space. The other co-founder, Alex, is keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So she'll be managing that side of things today. The chat is there. You all can chat with each other. Let us know which tips you hear you're the most excited about. Just keep it clean, keep it civil. We are an inclusive community, obviously, so we celebrate each other. We never bring each other down. If you do have questions, I already see some of you do, just hit that little Q&A button in the bottom and throw your question in there. We're gonna get to those, or as many of those as we can, in the last 15 to 20 minutes of tonight's panel. All right, and yeah, we'll just get started. We have two awesome people with us today. First, we have Heather Antos, editor at IDW. Heather is an award-winning comic book editor and writer, most known for her work on Marvel's Star Wars and Deadpool lines, as well as one of the co-creators of Gwenpool. You can find her editing various titles at Image, IDW, and Humanoids. Welcome, Heather. And then we also have Teddy Leo, editor at AfterShock. Teddy has a passion for producing new and innovative ways to tell, experience, and consume stories. He has brought his expertise to a diverse set of roles throughout his career, including associate editor at AfterShock Comics and Seismic Press, themed experience designs at Tal Creative, and head chef / F&B operations manager at the Lake Mohawk Pool and Spa.
What's up?
What is up? Thank you both
Hey.
for being here. Oh man, I've been excited for this ever since we talked a month and a half ago, whenever it was that we got started with this conversation. So, thank you both.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure.
Comics are fun and awesome, and making them is even better than that. So,
Yes. Awesome. So let's just jump into the first question. That's also kind of gonna be like an intro for you two. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got your job as an editor, and like what was your journey into the position. I know people like knowing how to get to where you are. And we'll start with Heather.
oh my gosh. Yeah, so I'm not that there's a traditional path to becoming a comics editor, but I certainly have a less traditional path, in that I didn't do an internship. I didn't study publishing. I didn't study creative writing. My background originally was in theater and film production, and that's what I did my whole life up until my senior year of college, when I decided, well, that was nice, I don't want to do that anymore, which is very reassuring, you know, stepping into the world of adulthood, knowing that the last 22 years of your life were all for naught. But, you know, one of my really good friends at the time mentioned to me, well, you really like comics, why don't you just do that? Which it never had really occurred to me up until that moment that, like, oh yeah, people do this for a living, like people get paid to make these. Because, you know, I came from a super small town in the middle of the Midwest where like a local comic shop like wasn't a thing where I grew up. And so, you know, being a comics fan, and at the time I did like some entertainment journalism on the side, like I really just became like asking people and researching and trying to figure out like what could I do in comics, what makes the most sense to me. I like to write, but I didn't want to be a writer. I love to draw, didn't want to be an artist, but you know, there was this elusive title on every single comic: editor, editor, editor. And I happened to notice that the books that I enjoyed all seemed to be edited by the same small handful of editors. So there was something in whatever they were doing that was resonating with me, which I thought was really interesting. And I knew what an editor did at a traditional publishing house, right? But in comics, there's so many other people involved. So it can't be as simple as just reading a manuscript and giving notes and calling it a day. Also, shout out to people in traditional publishing. They do way more than that as well. But, you know, like any good millennial, I just started tweeting editors. And Twitter was less of the hellish landscape then as it is now. But I literally just started tweeting editors. I'm like, I'm interested in learning more about what you do. Will anyone talk with me? And that's how I met Jordan White, who was an associate editor at Marvel at the time, editing Deadpool. And we met up at C2E2. He talked to me for an hour, kind of gave me the ins and outs of what a comics editor does. I decided, yep, that's it. That's what I want to do. How the hell do I do that now? I can't get an internship. I don't live in any of the cities where there's a publisher. So I guess I'm just going to do it. And literally I just started self-publishing my own stuff. I started reaching out to any friends and artists I knew. You know, do you want someone to do all the bullshit that you don't want to do? Like, I will, you know, work on getting this, you know, production, wrangling all that, schedules, proofreading, blah, 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 all the stuff that no one else wants to do. I will do it. And I ended up putting together, at the time, what happened to be one of the most successful comic Kickstarters for the early 2000s, called Unlawful Good, an Anthology of Crime. And I will never come up with a better title in my life. That was it. And the Kickstarter was up and running 6 months later at New York Comic Con that year, where I happened to be. I ran into Jordan White again. And basically I showed him the anthology and I was like, look what I've done since we spoke 6 months ago. He asked me, you know, would you ever be interested in moving to New York? I said yes. 1 month later, I was interviewing with Marvel. 2 months later, I moved to New York City and was editing Star Wars books.
Amazing. Like super high speed, just jump right in. That's awesome. Do you remember which book there had the first edited by Heather Antos?
The first book that I am credited on paper is Princess Leia #2, nice. Which you can't see it, but there's a page up there. Nice. But yeah, yep.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely got to have that on your wall for forever.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
How about you, Teddy? Tell us about how you got your job as an editor and what the journey was like for you.
I was looking somewhere at my office. I think it's in one of the boxes. I have my first like credit too. I feel like as an editor, you like keep that. I don't know. I have. I'm glad someone also is keeping your first thing. I always look at it. I feel like it's like a big accomplishment. So kind of similar to Tyler, I didn't start off thinking like, oh, I want to be a comic book editor or even actually work in comic books. My thought process growing up, I grew up on in a family of real estate developers and everything. So I grew up on construction sites and watching buildings get turned from like an idea into like reality and everything like that. And then I got that book up there with the mouse, wrong way, here we go. That talked about how people got to design theme parks. And I was like, oh, okay, that takes my love of like art and like storytelling and it merges with something I understand, building stuff. So I was like, all right, that's what I want to do. I want to design theme parks. So that was kind of like my focus from second grade, like all the way through till now. I still want to do it. But along the way, Marvel got bought by Disney. And I thought, oh, okay, so if Disney is doing that and this MCU thing works, they'll probably start building rides based on it. So I should learn about comic books. And it just so happened I lived down the street from the Cooper School. So I started taking like Saturday classes there, and Joe Cooper would like come in and out of our class and like talk to me about different stuff. And I would learn from like Fernando Ruiz and everything on Archie at the time. I think he's still on Archie. But all of a sudden when I was in there, the kids got in a fist fight one day about comic books, about like who's a better superhero, like Batman or Iron Man or whatever. They got in a fist fight, and I was like, all right, these guys are serious. I don't think I want to work in this industry if this is how hardcore they are. So like, all right, yeah, I'm not gonna do this. But I continued learning about comics, and I always thought it was interesting. I was like, okay, to get into Imagineering, get into Disney's design firm, like I need to differentiate myself. So let me learn about the MCU and all the stuff. And then high school came around, and it just so happened that Mike Martz, who's the editor-in-chief of AfterShock and was obviously a well-known editor at Marvel and DC before that, he moved into the apartment building that I lived in Jersey. And I was talking to him, and I found out that he worked at Marvel. And at the time, I fanboyed out. I was like, "Oh my god, you're my ticket. You're it. Like, you know Marvel and stuff." And I was talking to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I just left Marvel." And I was like, "No, you just left Marvel? What do you mean?" He's like, "I'm starting this new company, AfterShock. We're gonna do like our own thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm taking a bunch of like kind of industry people with us." I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And then I was dating this girl at the time. We broke up, so I found myself with a lot of extra time because she was good at planning events and things to do. And I was like, you know what? I should, like, what's the odds that this guy moves into the apartment building? He lives really above me. Like, I should really go ask him if I could learn from him. So I went upstairs, knocked on his door, and he wasn't there. He was out. So I had to leave a note. And I left a note like, hey, I have this idea for like comic books and everything, like interactive thing. And I would be interested in like showing you and learning about Aftershock or whatever. So we set up day, like I think like that weekend. I showed him, I did all these storyboards and stuff, and he was like, wow, you're pretty serious for like, I knew I wasn't expecting such a pitch. And I was like, yeah, like, I really want to work in this. And I remember showing him my portfolio, like I was getting an art job or something, which I wasn't. Like, obviously, like you wouldn't need a portfolio for editing and stuff. And he was like, yeah, well, okay, so you seem like you have like the energy to be an editor, and kind of you understand those small details and everything. So would you want to learn how to be an editor? And I was like, yeah, sure. So that's when I started in high school, senior year of high school, as like an intern, like a few months after Aftershock launched. An intern. It was just me and Mike. I would just run upstairs, go into Mike's office, be like, hey, well, sorry, I did this. Like, do you have another thing? And he's like, all right, yeah, do this and whatever. At the time, because it was so early in the company, like I was doing a bunch of stuff because it was like all hands on deck. So I would go from like editing a script to then like trying to help with like copyright stuff, and then working with like making film and TV pitches in the early days before we had a full like film and TV team and everything like that. And then it just grew from there. I continued all through end of high school, through the summer, into college. All through college, became the editorial assistant, and then after college, when I graduated, became associate editor, Aftershock and Seismic, or YA imprint. But yeah, similar to Heather, where I didn't plan on being here, but I did get that internship just because Mike somehow moved into my apartment building along the way, which was
not a bad coincidence.
Yeah, insane coincidence.
All right, so going back to the fight at the Cooper School. Now that you're in comics,
who won, Batman or Superman?
Honestly, I think it was like a tie. I just remember being like, what is going on right now? I was drawing it. Fernando was like, oh, come on. And he like walked over and was like, no, get away. And then I remember going up afterwards and I was showing him something. I was like, did I do this right? And he was like, yeah, sorry, one sec. Like, let me kind of refocus. I was like, that's weird. Are like all the fanboys like this? What's going on with this? And he was like, it could be tense sometimes. I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to work in this. He goes, it could be fun when you find the right people, but there's some people that make it pretty bad. I was like, yeah, okay. And I remember thinking, all right, I'm definitely not working there. And then, here I am, however many years later doing it.
Yeah, I like that. At least the one piece of advice I hear from anyone that I ever talked to that's in comics, it's like you only want to work with the nice people that you like. So like that just kind of weeds out everyone else that isn't nice. At least that's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
So what's something about being an editor that you wish people knew you do, but that's rarely talked about? Like, what's one of those things you have to do that just you have
Um,
no idea you're doing?
a lot of internal battles.
Yeah,
A lot of constant internal battles. Like there's, you know, having worked at both like independent publishers, mid-tier and big two, you know, there's a lot of different roles of an editor that shifts from, you know, publishing house to publishing house. But like I feel like for a lot of people who aren't in the know and don't really understand how comics publishing works, or just publishing in general, or just entertainment, so you know, your movies, your films, your television, is not every decision is up to us. Most decisions aren't up to us, you know, especially when it comes to your Marvel, your DCs, or a lot of the big brand licenses, you know, those big editorial changes that everyone likes to yell and gripe about. A lot of times they don't come from the editors. But you know, that's one of the first rules you learn when you get into comics publishing, is you're going to get none of the credit, but 100% of the blame. And that's how it should be. You know, the creators should be celebrated 100% all the time. But you know, the editor is always going to be the bad guy in the view of the public. But you know, us internally, like our jobs, like we're constantly fighting for better schedules, we're constantly fighting for better rates, we're constantly fighting to do the stories the way that we view them and the talent views them the best. Like 90% of my job is meetings with other people trying to convince them to do the book in the best way possible. And, you know, that's not always the case. And then it's our job to make it the best book possible, given the sandbox we're allowed to play with. And so there's a lot, like it's not all just fun what if storytelling and giving notes on character. And like, I love that part of the job. That is a lot of the job, but there's, you know, especially like the higher up you go and the more responsibility you take on, there is a lot of negotiating, not just externally with talent and third parties, but also with your own team. And knowing how to do that deftly, and knowing, you know, when to give in, when to ask for more, when to, you know, whatever, is a huge part of what makes a good editor.
So interesting. Who, and I feel like I want to ask this question without having to make you throw anyone under the bus, but like, are you fighting with marketing, sales, like
everyone? Yeah, I mean,
everyone?
it depends. It depends. You know, you can. It could be something where, like, you know, sales doesn't see their predictions, their sales predictions are, you know, they can't base what they think on feelings, right? They're the number guys. They have to crunch, like, well, this is what this creator's previous sales are, this is what this character or titles like it previously sold, so this is what we think this is going to sell. And like, even though you have a gut feeling that like, no, this is going to be the next Walking Dead or whatever, and you know, here's my pitch to prove it and reasons why and blah 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 blah. The P&L is the P&L is the P&L is the P&L is the P&L. For those that don't know, P&L is the piece of paper that tells me how much money this book is going to make and how much I'm allowed to spend on it. And so like it, you know, like that dictates the page rate, that dictates the advance, that dictates, you know, whatever. And then so if the creator I want to work with in order to make it this big sale needs a number that's higher than that, you know, there's only so much I can do. And I have to either convince them to take a chance, or they might have decided, well, we already took too many chances this year, like we have to play it safe with this one, right? So that's like a circumstance. Or different publishing houses, you know, depending on who's on top and who's making the decisions. Like there are some executives, publishers, like whatever high level, you know, sign off people who they want everything to be their taste. They're not open-minded. You have to, whatever. And that's it. Like, and you might just know, well, I'm never going to get my Little Pony Star Trek crossover. Like, I'm never going to get that with this publisher because they're just never going to like see the potential no matter what, because they just hate cartoons, and that just might be what it is. Or you might be so lucky to have a publisher who just like, hey, so long as everyone else likes it and is excited about it, we can go for it, which is what you want and hope for. Right.
I can only speak on from like AfterShock, because I've only worked at AfterShock, so I've only worked at like our kind of level with it. We still always have the obviously battles going on. I feel like a lot of people don't understand that, like, when stuff, kind of like what Heather was saying, when something happens, oftentimes it's not really editorial's decision on the bigger things. But I will say, because of our size, oftentimes the different teams do work so closely at AfterShock, we're able to kind of understand, I think, more of like the everyday duties of like that specific person in that job, more than someone in a bigger company where you're kind of so away from editorial, or you're so away from like the marketing side or whatever. Obviously, at the end of the day, there's still times where you can't we can't pay that for a cover because that's not on the budget for this book, or that's not really an AfterShock book, even if you really think it's the next big thing. You're like, come on, like, you should really, I think this could be a really awesome thing. And it's like, that's not really the AfterShock brand. And you kind of have to understand that, because there are brands, right? And those brand things you have to continue and keep up. So even if it's a book that you really want to, and you'll like go into a meeting and be like, no, this is it, you have to listen to me, like, this is the next thing here. You kind of have to be like, I understand, like, it's just not going to happen. Kind of like what Heather was saying. I was struggling with that question, because I didn't really think I think that's probably the best one, actually, best answer right there.
It was a great answer, Teddy. I just want to throw a quick reminder for everyone that's watching. I see a hand raise. I see question in the chat. If you can, just throw the questions into the Q&A button there. It'll be easier for me to get through things when we start answering those at the end of the panel. But thank you for putting those in there. Looking forward to those questions.
Here. What up? Got colors in here. Now we don't support. Nice.
That's great.
Like.
All right, let's get into some pitching stuff. We'll start into kind of like a more logistical, like, how do you like to receive pitches?
I like to receive an actual pitch. If anyone who follows me on Twitter, they'll see, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I highly recommend it. I post out pro tips all the time for comics creators. But first and foremost, if you're sending a pitch to any, publisher, like, check that publisher's website to see what their submission guidelines are. Because there are some publishers, there's some editors who don't care, send them whatever. But, publishers have submission guidelines for a very specific reason. And that's to, one, make sure if you do submit that yours will get seen and has the best chance possible. But also it's to ensure that, you're not going to waste our times as editors. Like, to review pitches takes a lot of time, and, we're happy to do it, but we also have like actual books that have to get made and we need to focus on. And the thing that I get this even from agents, and it drives me insane, is they'll just send, well, here's the 400-page manuscript. And like, I'm not going to read that. Like, or here's the completed, 30-page first chapter. And like, that's great. And I'm so happy that you guys put all the effort into it, but that doesn't give me any of the information that I need in order to give you the best chance of success internally. And so, definitely check out what that publisher submission guidelines are, but no matter what, no matter whom you're pitching to, an agent, an editor, a publisher, you should have what I call a one sheet. And that's very simply a top sheet that has the title, the creative team, the log line, the high concept, the format, the audience, and a brief paragraph that's giving the story. It is one piece of paper that tells me everything I need to know in order to talk to my bosses, to talk to marketing, to talk to sales, to talk to entertainment, because they are not going to read, your 400-page manuscript. I might be so interested off of that one sheet that I'll be like, fuck, I am in, I'm going to read this manuscript. I'm here for it. No one else is going to. And so, to have just like a sheet that has like, here's the brass tacks, here's the bare bullets, here is everything I need, comps, whatever, or even just stats on the creators, right? Your previous work, or social media numbers, or like anything like that is going to be so much more beneficial and helping guarantee that your pitch gets seen and has the best chance of success.
Sorry, I wrote down on here, no wall of text as a pitch, please. Because that is, like you said, like I might read it if I have the time and I really get pulled into it, but no one else. It's just me who's going to read it probably. So yeah, definitely no wall text. Definitely everything that Heather said. And I would just, for like AfterShock size and everything, I think one of the big things people should check is what's already in a publisher's lineup. So if you go on the website and you check, you can see what kind of titles are already there. Because if you send, like, we have a book called Chicken Devil, where it's kind of like Frank Castle, who owns a chicken devil or a chicken restaurant, and he goes on this murdering rampage, whatever. So if you send a pitch like that, and you're like, oh yeah, this guy owns a shawarma shop and he's dressed up as a rabbit or something, like that's not going to work for us because we already have a story similar to that. So
are you
definitely
saying chickens, rabbits are similar?
I mean,
one is a mammal, Teddy.
I did fail science class a few different times. But yeah, so definitely I would check what the publisher's lineup is, because you don't want to send it in if like the story is exactly the same as something they already have, because you're just wasting your time. And as a creator, you put so much time and energy and yourself into your pitches. The more times you could limit the no answer back, I feel like the more it'll help you actually continue pushing forward. So, the more you check the submissions, instructions, and see what they're already, publishing, whatever, it'll kind of help you carve out that space and not hit those roadblocks that you shouldn't hit. Make it easier on yourself when you can, if those things are out there. So review them and look at it so you don't have to, get a no for no reason just because you sent it in the wrong way or something like that.
To double on that though, also like definitely look up to see what a publisher is doing so you're not duplicating, right? Because no publisher is going to want to cannibalize their own line. But also if you know like what editor you're pitching to, also make sure you know what stuff they like. Like and don't be afraid to ask them. Like literally, if you're pitching me, just be like, oh Heather, like what type of stuff do you like? What type of stuff do you not like? Like me personally, I hate time travel stories. Like it doesn't matter what it is, like I just don't like them. Which is really funny because one of my favorite projects right now happens to be a story where
I was going to say, as you're editing a time travel story.
It's not a time travel story though. Time travel is just a plot device in it. It's not a story that's about time travel. And that's the difference. But that's really important. Know your audience, know who you're pitching to, make sure you're giving them, or ask them like Teddy, I really want to work with you. I think you're a great editor. What is one type of book you've always wanted? You're welcome. What is one type of book, you've always wanted? What's one genre? Don't, if you have that door, ask the question, because, editors have dream projects that they want to do too. And like, what's the fastest way to get to work with an editor? Give them something that they're damn sure going to be fighting for.
Sure. If anyone's wondering, YA stuff, I love it. So yeah. that's her in on me.
There you go. Send Teddy the YA stuff. You kind of hit on this, Heather, a little bit, and one of my questions kind of goes into it. It's kind of like a two-parter. I'll ask the first part first. When you're getting a pitch from a writer, do you like them to have a team already set up, or do you like to set up a team yourself for the project?
It depends personally. You know, if a writer doesn't have a team already attached to it, then you know that does give us a lot more freedom of different directions that we can go. But it is always important to me that like the creator, you know, has a voice in that process. You know, if I'm reading a pitch and I really like it, but there's no artist attached, I always ask like, who's your dream artist for this? Like, what's your mood board? You know, send me some names, even if like, you know, even if you know they're not going to do it, right? Like, even if you're like, oh man, Alex Ross, I really want him to do this, but we all know he's not going to. Like, that's still good for me to know. That's helpful for me so I can run through my Rolodex of creators or start looking out for creators who, you know, fit that mold. But, you know, if you have a team that you've put together that is killing it, that really is just doing a good job, and are quality creators, like that is great too. They're just and like there's a lot of publishers that require that. They want to have that team already put together. But there are times, not often, but they do happen, where a pitch may come in and we're like, man, we really like this story, but this art is just not doing it, or this colorist is just not doing it. And then you have to have the awkward conversations of, you know, how involved are they? Do they have ownership? Like, can you know, what's the situation, and what can we work out? And, you know, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, they were just work for hire for these pitch pages. It's no big deal. They're paid. It's done. We can find someone else. But other times, you know, it could be, no, they're fully invested. It's half theirs. It's either this team or no team. So then it has to go back to the publisher to figure out like, well, is this something that we can work with and want to still pursue or not? So there's no one perfect scenario answer, but again, check out the publisher submission guidelines, because, you know, like if you're pitching to Image, you need to have an art team attached. Right. You just have to. So.
Man, you just... Okay, that was a good answer. I don't even know what to say.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know, follow her on Twitter. She's got all the tips and tricks. Yeah, no, my big thing was the potentially when a story comes in that is really good, but the artist isn't like the right caliber, or is kind of holding the project back. At AfterShock, I would say a lot of times we more often get projects that are without a full creative team. So it's up to us to kind of help build it out. Like Heather said, oftentimes that starts with, do you guys have anyone in mind? Have you worked with someone in the past that you'd want to, you know, bring on this project? Do you have like a dream artist or colors or something that you'd want to bring on here? But oftentimes when we have people that have worked together already on our books, we try to keep them together if they're a solid creative team. So I will say that if you have that solid creative team, and you kind of can show that you're able to execute on stuff, that kind of goes a long way, I think, with editors, especially for me, because it kind of takes away one part of the battle I have to have in being like, oh no, this is the story. If there's something I could show, like, oh, here's, you know, they can actually execute, here's their past books, rather than where it's like, oh, does this artist work with this writer? Can it work? Kind of takes away one of the different elements that someone outside of the editorial sphere will kind of like be like, oh no, strike down, that seems too complicated, or that seems like it could be a hiccup, so like cancel the project, something like that.
Cool, thank you both. I feel like I need to give Teddy a chance to answer first now.
Yes,
next time,
no, I'm not, I'm sorry.
I'm just taking notes over here, honestly. It's good.
Yeah,
I've made comics for a long time. I'm sorry.
That's why you're here.
I'm used with Mike and Christina. I'm used to this like all the time. I just listen and absorb.
Well, fun for you, Teddy. Mike hired me at Marvel, and Christina started like 2 weeks before I did.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned you, and they were like, "Oh, Heather, awesome, that's great." Unfortunately, Christina's sick today. She's had COVID for the past like week.
Oh no.
So yeah, she's been in and out. So our editorial team's in a little disaster, because Christina's such a main part of our team. So hopefully tomorrow she comes back.
It's gotta be tough when you just put out "We Live." That was a big one for y'all. All right, we won't get it. So we'll have Teddy answer first. For you, what makes a pitch really stand out? What makes it so that you're like, man, I have to work on this story?
If the pitch, one, because it's a pitch, if you can actually get your story idea and everything and the overall, feel and vibe of it across in a pitch in an easy way, that's the first thing to get me engaged. Because if I have to read your pitch and I'm like, what is happening here? What's going on? I'm so lost. Like, you've already lost me, like right from like the log line, right from the jump. But like more deeper than that, honestly, I always like stories that kind of start digging into the real the characters in like a real deep way, like what they struggle with, like what's the reason they're going on this quest, or what's the reason they're doing this thing, or for Chicken Devil, why is he murdering the Russian mob and not caring about it? It's because his family is killed and everything. So if you can get like that heart and really the character focus of it all, I think you have me attached to it. Also because I am always love to draw and stuff. If there's some like character concept art in there or something, I always like find that intriguing, just because I like to look at that stuff, or like different art. But really it comes down to like the characters, and if the story is something new and engaging, like Mike always says, kind of all the stories have already been told. It's about telling them in new ways for like the time we live now. So does that pitch do that? Here comes Heather with an amazing response.
No, oh no, now I'm self-conscious. No, I am really, if you look at the work that I've put out throughout my career, it's a vast, wide range of genres and characters and styles. But what I like to think is the through line throughout all of them is you have fully realized three-dimensional grounded characters, flawed characters, in unconventional circumstances. And so like that's what I tend to get drawn to is, these are fully realized, relatable, complex characters that we can envision in our everyday lives, but just in these crazy scenarios that are super hyper unrealistic. And because it's comics and bombastic and fun, and so I think there's some good balance there between realistic and unrealistic, and having just like a really strong high concept and having a clear vision. I think like that's a really important thing too for me in pitches is I want to know that the story that you want to tell. Not this like, oh well, this happens, like blah 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 blah. Like it needs to be very clear that what it is that you're gonna tell. Because if I'm gonna jump on board this train, we better have a destination that you know how to get to.
That's a great point. You both kind of hit on it. So like the other side of this question is, what's the big don't in pitches? What really makes you just put it aside right away and not waste your time on it?
It's funny, I'm looking at this and you can see me and Hannah both look off to do like definitely editorial things, stuff coming in. That's what you don't know about editorial is like it's always a constant flood.
Just checking the email.
Yeah. Oh, what is this? Is this a fire I have to put out right now? For me, right now, the things that are giving me like, oh, I just don't really want to read this pitch is like the multiverse stories, the time travel stuff. Really, that's really also getting me. So those things right now are kind of doing it. I think mostly we talk about this a lot at AfterShock, where especially for our size to go up against like Marvel, who's doing their multiverse and have always done it and stuff, it's kind of hard to do that. So those two elements are really always kind of like, I'm not doing it. But I would say the biggest thing that is like a total turn off in a pitch is if it takes like a real serious real world problem or scenario and it uses it as a way in a bad way to try to tell a story. I think that is one of the biggest turnoffs. If you're trying to take someone's like pain or like struggles or anything like that and use it, you think in a way to, a clever way to tell the story, and it falls flat on its face, or you're just using it in a really just tone deaf way. I think for me that's like the biggest turnoff on
like when it's not your story to tell.
It's not your story, or
when you're glorifying something, right? Like when you're like, oh man, I want to tell the story about a serial killer because I think serial killing, like there's something so fascinating when you're not taking into account like the victims were real people who had like brutal trauma and tragedy and like all of this stuff, or like something that I happen to call out in stories and all the time, and in a pitch recently that I just passed on. I know it wasn't the writer's intent, but like having a prostitution ring and like prostitutes as like sort of a set piece, and having the sexy lamp syndrome with the women, like literally. And I know that wasn't his intention. It was all about like, oh, the 50s noir era, whatever. But like, if you're going to have it in there, like, everything needs to be intentional. And
they're not a prop.
They're not a prop. It's not a setting. These are real people.
Right.
Like we don't use the word prostitute anymore, like all of these things. And I explained that to him and he like definitely took it to heart, but it's like, there's a lot of things like that unfortunately we have subconsciously been brainwashed in media that like this stuff is okay, or this is, how it is. And it's just really important to keep an eye out for those types of things. So I definitely agree with that note. And then like, I mean, look, if every single line in your pitch is comparing your pitch to something else, then there is nothing original about your story to me. Like it's one thing to be like, for fans of whatever, like that's fine. But if you're constantly referencing other works by other creators or other things in social and pop culture, like it's like I want to read your story. I don't want to, read all these other things.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna have one more question from me, and then we're gonna start hitting up some of these fan questions.
Fans? Oh, I definitely don't have fans.
I mean, they're here for you two, so yeah, they're fans. So is there a particular structure to a story that you've seen be more successful in comics, either successful in getting picked up or successful in sales, like in the shops?
I mean, I don't know, like it's all about having a well-paced story rather than I would say and I can I'll post this in the chat so everyone has it. But I have my handy dandy guide on how to structure so you have a strong like arc and structure in your story. And hold on, I'll just post it in the chat so everyone can follow along. And it is having one sentence explaining the setup of your story, one sentence that's a triggering event that motivates the rest of the story, another sentence where there's an escalation, everything gets more intense, the story reaches a climax, finally a sentence covering the story's resolution, right? And it's just a very simple way, like when you're plotting out.
Nice.
I would do these 5 sentences for what your whole arc is. And then for every individual issue in that arc, I would also do these 5 sentences before you do anything else, before you get into any nitty gritty. Because I feel like a lot of times writers get so focused, they can't see the forest through the trees, right? They're just all about all the little details and minutia and everything that goes on. So it becomes all seasoning and no meat, like I like to say. So make sure you get your meat down there first, and then you can have whatever fun you want to have. But like this, having something like this is really, really, really beneficial and helpful to have, to make sure you have, that structure in every single chapter of every issue that you're doing. And then that's my like general quick guide to how to
Very helpful.
structure.
I would just add that what was I gonna add? Oh man, are you kidding me? I don't know. If I think about it, okay. Oh wait, I do remember. There's certain stories that work well in comic books. There's certain stories that work well for like film and TV, right? If you have a story that's like all you need like music and some stuff like that happening in it, probably not the best format for you is comics, because you kind of need obviously now we put QR codes in there and that's a different thing. But there's certain stories that you're going to try to tell that there's different formats that actually work better for them. So let's just keep that in mind when you're pitching stuff and coming.
No, I think that's a very good point too. Another pitch that I recently passed on, someone pitched like it's like following a blind woman, right? And like Bird Box is cool on TV because we can stare at a black screen and have like all the sounds and like feel that, but comics are a visual medium, so like it was just a thing where I'm just like, unless you can really sell this in art, I just don't know how this concept of someone being blind in a comic book works. Like I just like even Daredevil, right? His superpower is that he can essentially see through sound. So yeah.
We also passed on a pitch like that recently.
Yeah.
All right, so I lied, and I now have a follow-up question before we get to the fan questions.
Oh man.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I know.
Can't do that. Sorry, you should find a question.
Well, now y'all distracted me.
With editors.
So it's so the breakdown, Heather, that you put in is super helpful, and it got me thinking. When you receive a pitch or when you're talking to a writer or whatever it might be, like, do you expect them to already have a script written, or do you kind of just want them to have a pitch so you can kind of work on them for the story?
Yeah, I mean, some people already have scripts written and that's totally fine. I just always like to, it's really important for me to like get a sense of like, well, how attached to that script are you? Because chances are like, we're going to have to go in and gut it pretty heavily. Unless you're a writer that I've worked with a ton and I know like you know your shit and you got your stuff. But I'm starting to work with a lot more newer or less experienced creators, which means there's a lot more heavy lifting on my end, which I'm totally fine for. But I definitely prefer to get in from the ground up. To be able to help develop and make sure the story is the strongest that it can be before anyone starts, churning out 100 pages of scripts that could be all for nothing.
True that. Yeah, AfterShock, we deal with a lot of, we have a lot of the industry heavy hitters, but oftentimes we're dealing with new creators or bringing people in from different mediums and stuff to try to do comics and everything. So for us, I feel like it's almost a waste of time to move ahead with scripting or stuff, because a part of our editorial flow is giving notes on the outline and then kind of giving the green light to like, okay, you can start scripting, and then giving those notes on the specific scripts. Because like Heather mentioned before, sometimes writers get lost on the really tiny details and kind of forget about the bigger elements that needs to be really like nailed down for a story to actually work. So that kind of allows us to make sure that those bigger pieces that then can hold up all those smaller pieces that, creating the world and stuff are actually there. Because, I had to go through a script that was like literally over like for an issue 1, which was like 20 pages. It was supposed to be a 20-page script. It was like 180 pages. So, I mean, I honestly, it was like one of the first few weeks. So I thought it was a hazing thing. I was like, this is a sick editorial hazing thing. It has to be. It wasn't. It's just, a great story, but it just takes a lot more effort on editorial to go back. If we started early on, we could have saved the writer and everything a lot of time and effort that they put into that earlier.
Awesome. Thank you for all those. We're going to start hitting up some of the questions from the Q&A in the chat. So first one I saw is, are you all the ones that are scouting talent, or do you have a roster of talent to work with and you go from there?
Yes and yes. A lot of comics is a very fast-paced industry, and there isn't a lot of room for forgiveness in that. And so building a team of creatives that are reliable and we can trust is like huge. It's a huge deal. And I always say, only cast one problem child per book. If you're working, and then make sure they're worth it, right? If you're working with a cover artist who is just always late, make sure that your writer and your artist and your penciler and your colorist are hitting their deadlines, because you're going to be spending all your time on that book chasing that cover artist. And so it's really, really important for editors to have their talent that they can trust. And then when there's room, take chances on people that, you really want to work with and give a chance and, see what they can do. And like, I'm constantly I have like a list of creators that I'm keeping an eye on and I'm looking for the right project on. And, every editor does, but like understands, that like it's like it's really risky for editors to take chances on new talent. It really, really is. And so if you are given one of those shots, don't fuck it up, man. Like, do not blow it.
Hit those deadlines. Hit those deadlines.
Hit those deadlines, or at the very least communicate if you're not.
Right.
Like, do not ghost your team.
It's the worst. The ghost is the worst. I would just add that for me, one of the earliest things I did at AfterShock was ran our submissions email and everything. So when I first got on there, it was about like 8 months of a backlog of our submissions. So I went through and actually reviewed everything and cataloged different artists and writers and everything. And it's become one of my favorite parts of being an editor, trying to scout for talent and making connections and everything. Like, I have on my Instagram a saved album of like artists that I find and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or I have a folder on my desktop of, artists to keep an eye on. I have a whole system that we've developed and stuff that is like, ready to go, need some more time, keep an eye on this person, never going to work in comics if they were just bad to people, right? We have that folder, so if you're a jerk, you're going to get the X on it. Yeah. So all those different elements, I think creators should kind of keep in mind. And then also, I always say this, is that an editor can't know you exist unless you're out there, showing your work, talking to us at conventions, being active in communities and stuff. We do our best at trying to find people, but we also have to make sure our books get out on time, and we have to, go up to bat for our creators, or try to get extra money to pay for a new artist, or say why, oh, that artist is worth it, we should take a risk on them. So we're always doing a lot of stuff. So just keep that in mind of, it's a two-way street. It's not just editors trying to find you. You also have to be out there and being like, hey, I'm over here. Here's my work. Can you look at it? Take back feedback in the right way. Just don't come at AfterShock. Don't come at editors as like we're the bad guys. We're trying to really give you the feedback so you can be better. Because we always want to find new talent. Like, it's a part of our business. We work with creators and stuff. We want to find those people and bring them on board when we can.
And to add to that too, have your contact information available. I can't tell you how many like creators who, like artists especially, whose like work I come across on social media, and they'll like go to their profile and they have no link to a website, they have no contact available, their DMs are not like, I have no way to reach out to you. Do not make it impossible for yourself to find work.
Yeah. Put your email in your
Great
portfolio.
point. Great
All these
point.
different things. Yeah.
I've seen that said many times on Twitter. It's no, people aren't listening.
If I had $1, man.
Yeah, for real.
All right, here's a quick one. Nice little listicle we can do. What exactly should be included in a pitch package? Like if you had said 5 things that you have to see in a pitch document, what are those things?
The title. Are we talking pitch package or are we talking
pitch
one
package.
sheet?
The question from Aaron Lee was pitch package. Yeah.
Okay, so you need your top sheet, which is that sheet we discussed before where it had all your basically brass tack bullet points. I would then say have 1 to 2 pages max of your story. So like your issue breakdown, or this is what the OGN is. And then a couple pages of like character designs or sample artwork if you have an art team available. In general, unless the submission guidelines state otherwise, right? Again, because like Image is asking like 5 to 8 pages of art, something like that.
Right.
It varies from place to place, but like in general, you want as few pages as possible. You want to get the most information, the biggest splash, and the smallest package, right? Like that's what you want. Because again, every single time I see a pitch package, I download the file, I open it up, it says 30 pages. I'm just like, all right, close that. We'll deal with that later.
Yeah.
If I
Later,
get to it,
doesn't come. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Spot on. I have
Cool.
nothing to add.
Let's see. Braden asked, it seems like the role of a large company editor was primarily that of a project manager. Do you find that this is still the case, or has the role evolved over time?
I think creative project management is the job. We are managing the project and also giving creative feedback. You'll also play babysitter, you'll also play therapist, you'll also play confident, you'll also play, a lot of different hats. But yeah, like we are project managers. That is really with an expertise in comics specific.
Yeah, just to go off that, like I'm the recommendation on a US visa. So like there's a lot of things where you build up with your creators and stuff and the people you work with. So you kind of wear so many different hats during the day that it's impossible to really nail it down to like one specific. That's like the hardest thing. People are like, oh, what are you doing as an editor? I'm like, I don't know. I got a call from the U.S. government if the person was a good person that they could let into the country. So like, I don't know, like a lot of stuff all day long. So yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Would you recommend submitting pitches through the publisher submission page on their site or submitting directly to editors?
Ask the editor first. I always say, like in any relationship, ask for consent. Don't just spam your editor with your 5 pitches all at the same time. You want your best chance for success. So if you have a contact with an editor that you think would like your pitch, like reach out and be like, hey, I have a pitch. Are you accepting submissions right now? Can I pitch through you? I prefer that personally. And then the editor might be like, protocol is through the guidelines. Sorry, that's how you have to submit. And then you have your answer. But when in doubt, ask.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
spot on. Yeah, I mean, I will say that it kind of gives editors to have that like secondary submissions email and stuff. Be like, do I have the time to like look at this? If not, like I can put it over there and people will look at it, or I'll get to it when I have to review that. Like for me, I know that if I work with this creator or whatever, I have to try to decide if someone is really trying to actually make a connection with you because they want to build up like a connection and work with you? Or is it just like, I have a pitch, nice to meet you, can you, make my book? If not, like, I don't care about you. So a lot of times, as an editor, when you're getting pitches or talking to people, you're kind of trying to figure that out. And that submissions email kind of gives us a spot to put people if we're still trying to figure out what the angle is.
Got it. All right, and this last question, we're hitting our time limit here. Teddy, it's not going to be possible for you to have a just spot on for Heather. Everyone gets their own answer. Someone asked, what was one story that came across your desk that really impacted you and somehow stood out? So that one story you worked on that you just are so happy you got to work on that really impacted you, your career, your life, whatever it might be.
Oh gosh, I'll go first. I mean, this is kind of a cheat answer. I don't know if it counts, but because there's some really cool stuff that I can't talk about because it hasn't been announced yet. So sorry, read my stuff. But I would say, I mean, like getting to help develop and create Gwenpool and make her as special as she is. Like, I mean, it's changed my career. It's changed my life. It's given me like lifelong relationships with fans and creators, and like, what was supposed to be just a fun variant cover gag became like a fully realized, grounded, complex, three-dimensional character in a highly unconventional circumstance, right? Like she was us. She was a comic book fan trying to figure out how to become a creator, lost in her world, and got sucked into the Marvel universe. And just like one of the most fulfilling stories I've ever got to work on. And yeah.
Amazing.
That's unbelievable, actually, as amazing as Spider-Man. Gwenpool is unbelievable.
That's a tough question. I would say that I don't know, I feel like the projects I'm working on right now that are coming up, I'm always so excited for. So like I wish I could talk about those. But I would say We Live at AfterShock is like our big series and everything. And what the Anaki brothers do with those characters and the scenarios that they put them in and the world that they created, when you work on it, I think Heather probably will say the same thing. When you're working on a story, you kind of feel like is going to be like way outlive you, right? Now at Marvel, right, you're working on characters that have, lived before you and will live on before or after you. Now at AfterShock, we're kind of still building that. So to work on a project that felt like this was going to be something that lived on way longer than us. And hopefully a lot of our projects at AfterShock feel like that, but We Live is just because of how it's hit with the readers and, like the fans and the messages we get and the love that they've shown to like Anaki and Roy and the whole creative team and stuff. It kind of just feels like like a family. And I always feel like those projects feel the most fun to work on just because you feel like you're working on something, you're giving it all. We Live was a very tough book for all of us to put out and everything, the amount of variant covers and the different two stories merging into one and the original score and all the different elements to it. So, for me, that one's always going to have a special place in my heart just because it felt like we're making something that was going to, live forever, which for me is at AfterShock and not worked at Marvel yet. It was like a new experience, yet.
I like the yet in there. Nice.
Still trying to design theme parks, Marvel. Brian Crosby, Marvel Theater Entertainment. I'm here.
Love that. All right. So we're going to cut it there. I do see there's a lot of questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. For anyone that had a question, I will make sure I grab all those and I'll do my best to grab you answers. If not from Heather and Teddy, because they are both very busy, I will find you answers any way I can. I have your emails of everyone that's here anyway, so we'll get your answers. To the two of you, thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge, for everything.
Yeah, appreciate inviting me.
Thank you for having us.
I got a mentorship out of this as well. This is good.
There you go. You were taking notes on the side.
I have stuff right here. I was writing down.
There you go. There you go.
Mike Christina's taught me well.
Teddy, you have my contact. Reach out anytime.
Yeah, same.
Awesome, y'all. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.